Welcome, villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I'm your guide, KAGE, the creator and author behind all the what-if stories you see on this channel, powered by your amazing suggestions. Every story you hear is written, edited, and produced by me, so if you're ever wondering who's behind the magic, it's me. I hope you enjoy today's video. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon to stay updated, like the video, and don't forget to drop your what-if ideas in the comments. Today's story is the movie for What If Naruto Was in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I know there's only one part of that FIC out, but there was actually a second part I didn't upload that's on my Patreon. So I still can make a movie out of it. Oh, and surprise, double upload in one day. Now, without further ado, let's jump into this what if. Zelda, the dim light of the setting sun cast a fading glow over the world, bathing it in tranquility, everywhere except one battlefield, untouched by its peace. A cavern, once grand and imposing, now lay in ruin. Jagged rock formations and shattered statues, once seated in silent opposition, were nothing but debris scattered across the ground. Pools of water dotted the cavern floor, remnants of a once mighty source now abruptly drained or destroyed. The sheer devastation seemed beyond the work of any single force, yet that was not far from the truth. "Damn you, Sasuke," a voice roared through the darkness. A blonde-haired boy, his spiky locks wild and untamed, sprinted forward, fury burning in his blue eyes. Across from him stood his rival, raven-haired, cold, and unwavering. Both were battle-worn, their tattered clothes and bruised bodies telling the tale of a clash far beyond an ordinary scuffle. These were no ordinary shinobi. The first, Naruto Uzumaki, the child of prophecy, the reincarnation of Asura, the son of the Yellow Flash, had surpassed every expectation placed upon him. Strong in his own right, his power was undeniable. The second, Sasuke Uchiha, the last of a fallen clan, the reincarnation of Indra, the brother of Itachi the god of Genjutsu, was nearly his equal, a prodigy once consumed by the allure of power. Now, they fought not just for dominance, but for their dreams, visions that could shape the world for better or worse. But today, their battle would mark the beginning of the end for the shinobi world. Even after all this time, the shinobi was ready. With instincts sharper than steel, Naruto surged forward at unrelenting speed. He knew what was at stake. Failure was not an option. Leaping high, he aimed an axe kick at Sasuke. The strike connected, but against a firm block. Sasuke countered immediately, driving a quick jab toward Naruto's gut. Naruto reacted without hesitation, catching his rival's fist. With a sharp tug, he pulled Sasuke in and slammed his forehead into him, then sent him flying with a powerful kick. Sasuke tumbled across the ruined cavern floor, fatigue gnawing at his body. Gritting his teeth, he barely had time to stop himself before a fist crashed into his temple. The force nearly knocked him off his feet, but Naruto wasn't done. Twisting mid-motion, the blonde drove a kick into Sasuke's ribs, then kneed him in the gut before launching him backward with a final, brutal strike. Skidding to a stop, Sasuke clutched his side, glaring at Naruto, who was catching his breath after the relentless assault. "You won't win, Naruto," Sasuke growled, his Sharingan blazing. Naruto lifted his head, determination burning in his eyes. "No way, I'm letting you beat me, Sasuke." This was it, the final stretch. Their battle had raged on for hours, but Naruto wouldn't stop. He would save Sasuke, no matter what. The two warriors locked eyes, but their hands moved just as fast. Chakra surged around them in a violent storm, electricity crackled around Sasuke, while spiraling winds coiled around Naruto. The air was filled with a deafening cacophony, the sharp chirping of Chidori, the fierce howling of Rasengan. "Sasuke," Naruto roared. "Naruto," Sasuke shouted back. They charged. In a flash, they met in the center, pulling their hands back before launching their jutsu forward. The Rasengan and Chidori collided, power clashing in a violent explosion. The sound shifted unpredictably. One moment, the crackling of lightning dominated. The next, the spiraling winds of the Rasengan roared in defiance, teeth clenched, eyes locked, neither backed down. But then, something went wrong. the raw energy at the point of impact began to twist and fuse, forming a brilliant, blinding sphere. Before either could react, it expanded, swallowing Naruto whole and blasting Sasuke back. Agony shot through Naruto's arm as it began to disintegrate, his scream echoing through the cavern. He barely registered the glowing seal forming on his left arm before, in an instant, he vanished. While unconscious, a voice whispered into Naruto's mind, "When the glow of the blood-stained moon shines upon the land, the aimless spirits of slain monsters return to flesh. The world is threatened once again." The soft, haunting words stirred something within him. A faint sense of unease crept into his subconscious as his mind clung to the voice. Naruto's body twitched slightly. The warmth of curiosity and confusion flickered within him, urging him to wake. As the darkness around him faded, his eyes began to crack open. Once the blonde's eyes were fully opened, he found himself in a cave, one that was filled with the roots of trees, and only a dim film of light dared to reach him. What was that? Naruto muttered aloud, his voice breaking the eerie silence around him. The words he had heard, they made no sense. Yet, a lingering unease settled in his chest, as if something terrible had happened. He gave his head a quick shake, trying to clear his thoughts. None of that mattered right now. From the looks of it, he was nowhere near the Valley of the End. And he didn't have any of his shinobi tools, or any clothes aside from his orange pants. He didn't even have his headband. What happened? Where was he? Why did his head feel like it had been smashed between two mountains? And how long had he been out? Questions flooded his mind, questions that needed answers if he was going to make sense of whatever the hell had happened after his clash with Sasuke. Scratching his cheek in thought, Naruto suddenly froze. His eyes widened as an unsettling realization hit him. "What the hell happened to my arm?" he shouted, stumbling back. His right arm was gone. In its place was something else entirely, an arm that wasn't his, glowing faintly, with elongated, almost animal-like nails. His mind raced. He vaguely remembered the burning sensation in his arm before everything went dark, but this? This wasn't normal. Something was definitely off. He needed answers, fast, but before he could spiral further into confusion, another voice echoed in his head. It wasn't familiar. But at least it wasn't the same soft voice that had whispered of something called the blood moon. "Child, you're finally awake." The voice said, strong, wise, and kind, yet laced with an undertone of sorrow, maybe even disappointment. Naruto turned, scanning the space for its source. "Who are you?" he asked, his eyes landing on nothing but stone, roots, and ancient walls. "I was told the one I would aid wouldn't speak much, but I suppose that was because Zelda's old friend, Link, is gone." Zelda, Link, who the hell was this voice talking about? And why wasn't it answering his questions? "Hey, I'm right here, and I have no idea what you're talking about." A low, apologetic chuckle echoed. "Forgive me, I had assumed there would be little need for explanation. As I've said, you were not meant to be here, but when you and your friend tore a hole in space and time, I had no choice. I needed someone to take Link's place in these trying times, so I pulled you into my world." Naruto clenched his teeth, a deep growl rumbling in his throat. This voice, it had taken him from his battle. His fight with Sasuke. "Wait, your world?" The weight of those words hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just far from Konoha, he wasn't in his world at all. Naruto forced himself to breathe, pushing down the anger rising in his chest. Losing his cool wouldn't get him anywhere. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice tight with restrained frustration, "but I can tell you're not a bad guy. Just send me back, I have things I need to do in my world." Saying "my world" felt strange. The realization of his situation settled deeper in his bones. "I'm sorry, but I cannot do that," the voice responded solemnly. "The only reason I was able to bring you here was due to the rift your battle created. There is no way to send you back." Naruto's fists clenched. "There's always a way," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber, but before he could say anything else, he exhaled sharply, gaze dropping to the ground. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Naruto's breath was steady, but his mind was anything but. His fight with Sasuke, his dream of bringing him home, Was it all gone just like that? His fists trembled at his sides. No, he wasn't going to accept that. There had to be a way back, there had to be. I don't care how difficult it is, Naruto finally spoke, lifting his head with a determined glare. There's always a way, and if I have to fight through this whole world to find it, then I will. The voice hummed in quiet amusement, though there was no mockery in it, just an understanding that came with age. That fiery will of yours, I see now why fate allowed you to take Link's place. But understand this, child, your presence here is not without purpose. The world you now stand in is on the verge of destruction, and without a hero to stand against the coming darkness, all will be lost. Naruto's expression tightened. And what, you expect me to be this hero? Yes. The blunt answer made him scowl. He wasn't about to just abandon his own world, his own people, for some prophecy in a place he didn't even belong. Before he could argue, something shifted within the space, like a whisper in the air, a presence unseen yet unmistakable. You wish to return home, the voice asked, almost knowingly. Then prove yourself. Find the strength to stand against the darkness, to restore balance to this world. If you do that, perhaps the answers you seek will come to you in time. Naruto's jaw clenched, frustration burning in his chest. It sounded like another prophecy, another grand destiny forced onto his shoulders. But, if this really was his only shot at finding a way back, then what choice did he have? With a slow breath, he flexed his strange, glowing arm, reminding himself of just how wrong everything already was. Fine, he said, voice firm, though the weight of it all pressed down on him. I'll play along for now. But don't think for a second I've given up on getting back home. Wonderful, but first, let's get you out of your place of rest, the voice said, its tone calm yet firm. There is something Link left behind, his sword, the Master Sword. Though broken, it can be restored. You must take the blade and find your way. Naruto nodded, though it felt like he was agreeing with himself more than anything. His gaze scanned the dimly lit chamber, searching until his eyes landed on something resting against the shrine's base. The sword was beyond broken, it looked like it had been corroded by time itself, as if fast-growing rust had overtaken it until the very tip snapped off. Yet, despite its ruined state, faint traces of blue light pulsed along the untainted edges, an eerie contrast against the surrounding darkness. Naruto carefully lifted the broken blade, feeling its weight, before securing it on his back with chakra. He wasn't sure why, but something about it gave him the sense that it still held power, even in its current state. Turning toward the exit, his sharp blue eyes locked onto the thick, dry roots barring his path. With a quick, untrained slash of his new arm, the brittle vines tore apart easily, clearing the way. Without hesitation, Naruto pressed forward. The next chamber was larger, but just as dark and ancient. Dust and dirt clung to the air, disturbed only by Naruto's footsteps. His attention was drawn to the center of the room, an elevated shrine, carved with intricate designs. Floating above it was an ethereal green glow, twisting and shifting into the form of a skeletal hand. Naruto furrowed his brows, stepping closer. He absent-mindedly adjusted the blade on his back before glancing down at his own strange, glowing arm, then back at the spectral hand before him. A pang of realization struck, the green glow washed over his face as he hesitantly reached out, an almost angelic hum resonating in his ears the closer he got. It was calming, entrancing, even. For a moment, he lost himself in the warmth of the energy, then, as his new arm made contact with the light, the skeletal image pulsed a brilliant blue. A sharp chime rang in Naruto's ears. Instinctively, he stepped back, his body tensing. But before he could question it, a deep rumble shook the chamber. The walls groaned as if something massive stirred within them. The vibrations weren't natural, they felt deliberate. Naruto clenched his fists, preparing for an attack. Then, with a heavy clank, a hidden mechanism triggered, and above the shrine, a stone door slowly slid open, revealing a new exit. Naruto exhaled, his shoulders relaxing just a bit. Guess that means I'm going the right way, he muttered, stepping forward toward whatever awaited him beyond. Naruto sprinted through the newly revealed exit, his feet barely touching the ground as he pressed forward. What greeted him next was a winding, almost unnatural path, an obstacle course of sorts. He was forced to climb jagged rock formations, scale walls with precise footwork, and even channel his chakra to walk across thin streams of water that cut through the stone. Each challenge tested his endurance, pushing his body to move instinctively despite the strange environment. At some point along the way, he stumbled upon a weathered chest tucked against the edge of a broken platform. Curiosity got the better of him, and with a quick flick, he pried it open. Inside, folded neatly despite its age, was an orange jacket, one that barely resembled his old one. The design was different, more like a hoodie than his usual attire, with a slightly longer fit and reinforced sleeves. It wasn't exactly his style, but it was better than nothing. With a shrug, he slipped it on, the fabric fitting snugly against his skin. Well, at least I don't look completely ridiculous, he muttered before pressing on. At last, he reached the final exit. A gentle but steady breeze met him as he took his last step out of the cavernous ruins and into the open air. The sudden brightness made him squint, his vision adjusting to the vast expanse before him. The warmth of the sun blanketed his skin, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the underground chamber. It felt rejuvenating, like a weight he hadn't realized was there had finally lifted. Naruto took a deep breath and stepped forward, his boots scraping against the stone ledge as he looked out over the landscape, and then, he froze, his breath hitched slightly as his mind processed what he was seeing: islands, floating, suspended in the sky like pieces of a shattered world, each one draped in lush greenery and ancient ruins. Waterfalls cascaded from their edges, dissolving into mist before they could ever touch the unseen ground below. The sheer scale of it all made his stomach twist with unease. This wasn't just some strange valley or an undiscovered mountain range, this was somewhere else entirely. Naruto swallowed, his fists clenching at his sides. Where the hell am I? He whispered, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. This world was weird. Sure, he had reluctantly agreed to help the new voice in his head, but Sky Islands? That was pushing his sense of adventure a little too far. Still, maybe this wouldn't be so bad. If nothing else, he could find something exciting to do while searching for a way home. Naruto stepped closer to the ledge, peering over the edge. Below him, another sky island hovered just beneath his current position. A small lake shimmering in the center like a target. He sighed, rolling his shoulders. Guess there's only one way down. He took a step back, inhaling deeply. His heartbeat quickened, not out of fear, but anticipation. If he was going to figure out how to survive in this world, he'd have to take some risks. With that thought, he bent his knees, steadied himself, and jumped. The moment his feet left solid ground, the wind roared past his ears, whipping through his hair as he plummeted. For a brief second, his mind went blank, stunned by the sheer rush of free-falling. But then, a grin spread across his face. The sensation was thrilling, his clothes flapped wildly, his fingers stretched into the open air. And his body cut through the sky like a falling star. A wild laugh tore from his throat as he embraced the exhilarating descent. The ground rushed toward him fast, but his aim was true. With a mighty splash, he plunged into the lake, the cool water engulfing him instantly. Naruto kicked upward, breaking through the surface with a gasp. He blinked away the water and pushed his soaked hair back, laughing a little to himself. Safe and sound, he muttered before glancing around the new island. Now, where to next? With a simple push, Naruto made his way out of the lake. Small stone steps lined the edge, making it easier to climb out of the water. Once he was on solid ground, he gave himself a vigorous shake, sending droplets flying in every direction. His clothes, however, remained damp and clung uncomfortably to his skin. He sighed, maybe jumping into the lake without a way to dry off wasn't my best idea, still pretty fun. Brushing a hand through his soaked hair, he turned his attention to his surroundings. Small trees and thick bushes dotted the island, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. It was a peaceful scene, but Naruto's mind was already focused on survival. His stomach gave a faint grumble, reminding him that he had no supplies, no food, and no ninja tools. He scanned the trees, eyes landing on a bright red apple hanging just within reach. Guess I'll have to work with what I can find. He muttered, plucking the fruit with ease. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. It wasn't ramen, but at least it was fresh and edible. Survival instincts kicking in, he decided to grab a few more, stuffing them into his pockets. He didn't trust anything else he had seen, especially the mushrooms, which were way too colorful to be safe. No way I'm testing my luck with those. Next, he needed shelter. Normally, he could build a makeshift tent, but with no tools or materials, he wasn't confident in crafting one out of thin air. Leaving the sky would be the better option. If he was lucky, he'd find some form of civilization and, hopefully, a real answer about why he was here. Finally, he needed weapons and supplies. His shinobi gear was gone, no kunai, no shuriken, nothing. The only thing he had was the broken, rusted sword on his back, which was practically useless in its current state. With that, Naruto set off, determined to gather what he needed before leaving this place altogether. A few steps later, he spotted something strange. At this point, encountering new things was becoming routine, but this? This was something else. Even Kakashi wouldn't have seen this one coming. Before him stood a floating, cylindrical machine, its parts hovering and shifting independently to form a humanoid figure. A helmet-like structure adorned its head, while glowing energy arms wielded a wooden sword. It seemed to be searching for something. Hopefully, not him. Naruto turned to leave, wanting to avoid trouble, but the machine locked onto him immediately. Its shadow stretched over his own, creeping closer without a sound. By the time he realized it, the machine had already raised its weapon to strike. Naruto reacted instantly. With a swift motion, he caught the incoming blow before countering with a devastating punch to its core. The machine shattered on impact, disintegrating into dust before his eyes. "I was gonna leave you alone," Naruto muttered, his eye twitching in mild annoyance. Since when did robots know how to launch sneak attacks? This world just kept getting weirder. As the dust settled, two objects remained where the machine had stood. One was a glowing orb of energy encased in metal, the other a jagged, blue and orange blade. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why did it disintegrate like that, and why were these the only parts left? Before he could think too hard about it, the one silent voice returned. "That orb is a zonai charge, and the blade is a construct horn," the ethereal voice explained. Naruto glanced at the items again before pocketing them. They could be useful, at least, he hoped they would be. Shaking off the strange encounter, he moved on. The thought of nightfall creeping in made him all the more eager to keep going. Naruto continued through the strange sky island. His thoughts still occupied by the weird robot he had just taken down. This place was definitely not normal, not that he expected it to be, but this was on a whole other level. As he wandered, he noticed another construct standing near a stone platform. Unlike the one that attacked him, this one seemed passive, simply waiting. Its glowing blue eyes focused on him as he approached. "Ah, you are not the one I was expecting," the construct stated, tilting its head slightly. Naruto blinked. "Huh?" The construct straightened. "This device was entrusted to me by Lady Zelda. It was meant for the swordsman named Link upon his awakening. However, as he has not appeared, and you are the only traveler present, I shall entrust it to you instead." Those names again, when was he gonna learn about those two? It felt like he was being left out of a big part of a story. The construct raised one of its floating arms, revealing a sleek device. It was dark, with gold and blue accents, covered in strange, intricate markings. Naruto took it hesitantly, turning it over in his hands. Thanks, but who's Zelda and Link?" "Lady Zelda is the ruler of Hyrule. She left this device in my care for the hero of legend, Link, who was expected to awaken here. However, he has not appeared, and you seem to have taken his place." Naruto frowned as the realization fully sank in. He had replaced this Link guy. Even the voice from before hinted that something had gone wrong. If Zelda had left this device behind specifically for Link, then she might have known something about what was happening. Did that mean she had answers? If so, he needed to find her. If he was stuck in this world, he at least needed to know why. Naruto sighed, pocketing the device. great, another mystery to add to the pile. The construct continued, unfazed. That is the Purah pad, a tool designed by Lady Purah. It will assist in navigation, documentation, and survival. Use it well on your journey. Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his head. Yeah, guess I'll figure it out as I go. With that, he turned away, glancing down at the device again. Well, at least he had some idea what to do now. If he found Zelda, he would know exactly what taking Link's place meant, and maybe even had some ideas for him to get to his world. Naruto moved past the fallen construct, setting his sights on the sky island below. A massive structure stood there, a shrine-like building that widened as it ascended, its white stone walls stretching high into the sky. Something about it felt like an exit, a way to finally reach the ground. Not that he had many options, he had already learned the hard way that jumping off these floating islands wasn't an option. Some kind of magic always teleported him back before he could fall too far. He needed to find another way down. With that thought, Naruto leapt to the next sky island, landing smoothly before sprinting through the dense forest. His fists tore through unsuspecting constructs, his legs carried him effortlessly across the grassy plains, and his shinobi instincts kept him moving, dodging attacks without breaking stride. He weaved through trees, vaulted over startled wildlife, and gathered anything useful along the way. It didn't take long before he reached the entrance of the towering white structure. Naruto now stood before an arched gateway, its intricate designs weathered and partially overtaken by moss. A clear lake stretched beyond it, its still waters reflecting the shrine's towering stairs. His time in this forest had already bored him, none of the constructs had put up much of a fight. But exploring this strange place? That was interesting. With an eager grin, he stepped onto the lake's surface, ripples forming beneath his feet as he walked across the water. Upon reaching the stone steps, he wasted no time ascending, ready to see what the building had in store, and what he found did not disappoint. A construct stood at the top, but unlike the ones he had encountered before, this one was different. It was larger, massively so, and instead of 2 limbs, it had 4. Twin blades rested in its hands, and a sturdy helmet covered its floating head. Naruto sighed. The thing had been watching him the entire time. This wasn't like the others. It hadn't attacked immediately, nor was it mindlessly patrolling. This one was calculating. Naruto lowered himself into a stance, studying the construct's movements. He noted the cracks in its armor, the subtle shifts as it observed him. Then, as if reaching the same conclusion, both rushed forward at the same time. Unlike the other constructs, this one was fast. It adjusted to his movements, dodging as he ducked beneath a sword strike. Another blade came down, forcing him to sidestep before retaliating with a kick. The construct evaded effortlessly. Naruto flipped to the side, using the momentum to launch an open palm strike at its chest. Wind howled around his hand as he struck, but the attack barely made the construct flinch. His eyes widened. That should have done something. Before he could dwell on it, the construct swung again. He barely dodged, creating distance between them. Now standing apart, Naruto steadied himself, hands resting on his knees as he analyzed his opponent. No obvious weak spots. No hesitation in its attacks. If he had underestimated it, he might have been killed. Exhaling, he stretched out his right arm, his new arm, to the side. It didn't matter how strong this thing was. Nothing could withstand a Rasengan. Closing his eyes, he focused. Chakra stirred inside him, familiar and warm. He reached for it, molding it into the spiraling sphere he had created countless times before, but nothing happened. His right arm remained still, empty, no swirling chakra, no familiar hum of compressed energy. Why can't I make a Rasengan? Naruto muttered, eyes narrowing in confusion. Before he could dwell on the thought, the construct lunged. He dodged instinctively, kicking one of its swords into the air. The blade spun before falling, right into his waiting grasp. Without thinking, he slashed forward, cutting clean through the construct's core. The enemy froze. Then, in the blink of an eye, it crumbled to dust. Naruto exhaled, watching as its remains vanished, leaving behind a large zonai charge and his newly acquired weapon. He slung the blade over his back before looking at his right hand again. The construct was strong, but that wasn't the real issue. He couldn't use his jutsu, and that was a problem. Naruto's gaze remained fixed on his right hand, its unnatural form a stark reminder of what had happened to his original limb. His arm had been taken, burned away in the clash between his and Sasuke's jutsu. Right before he had been thrown into this world, and now, things were starting to make sense. The chakra in his right arm was gone, not just exhausted, but completely absent. Because this arm wasn't his, it wasn't from his world, chakra couldn't flow through it. There were no chakra coils. No network to guide his energy. That explained why he could water walk, but molding a Rasengan with his right arm was out of the question. But what did that mean for his other techniques? Frowning, Naruto clenched his left hand, feeling the familiar warmth of chakra thrumming beneath his skin. His left arm was still his own, his coils still intact. Maybe he could still use jutsu with his left side. Without hesitation, he lifted his left hand and focused. He pulled on his chakra, shaping it into the spiraling form of a Rasengan. This time, the energy responded. A sphere of compressed chakra flickered into existence, swirling violently in his palm. The familiar hum filled the air, the sheer force making his sleeve ripple. However, this form was unstable and unrefined. He would have to relearn the basics of making a Rasengan. Naruto grinned. At least he knew he wasn't totally helpless, but that also meant his right arm was completely useless for ninjutsu. And he would probably need to use one-handed hand seals, or at least make his own versions of jutsu. Lowering his imperfect Rasengan, Naruto flexed his fingers. He needed to figure out what this new limb could do. If it wasn't compatible with chakra, then what was it meant for? Naruto sighed, shaking his head. Maybe he was just overthinking it. This arm was probably nothing more than a prosthetic, something to replace what he lost. It just couldn't use jutsu, that was all. Pushing the thought aside, he bent down and grabbed the large zonai charge left behind by the defeated construct. He gave it a quick once-over before tucking it away, then turned toward the massive doors leading into the shrine. As he approached, the intricate carvings along the doorframe pulsed with a familiar green light, the same glow he'd seen when he first woke up. The same eerie, skeletal hand symbol stared back at him from the center of the door. Confidently, he placed his palm against the symbol, expecting the door to react like before. Instead, the glow flickered, shifting from green to an angry red. A large X formed where his hand had touched. Pulsing as if rejecting him outright, Naruto blinked. He pressed his hand against it again, harder this time. Same result. The blonde stepped back, crossing his arms with a frown. Why wasn't it working? Before he could try again, the voice from before echoed in his mind. You lack the power to proceed. Naruto tensed, eyes darting around. You again, he muttered. What do you mean, lack the power? This arm worked just fine last time. A deep chuckle filled the shrine. That arm you wield, it is mine. Naruto turned sharply, his body instinctively dropping into a defensive stance. From the shadows of the shrine, a figure began to materialize, a tall, imposing presence with an ancient, regal air. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he took in the figure before him. The most jarring thing wasn't just that the man was transparent, but that he had the distinct features of a goat. Still, that wasn't the weirdest thing he had seen. Naruto crossed his arms. And who the hell are you? The figure gave a small, apologetic nod. I did not mean to startle you. Naruto let out a breath. Well, I wasn't expecting to meet the voice in my head this soon. The last one I had, let's just say things got messy. The figure chuckled, not loudly, but with genuine amusement. No, I am no mere voice in your head. In fact, I am not in your head at all. I am Roru, the one to whom that arm originally belonged. Naruto blinked. Yeah, I heard you the first time. Roru chuckled again, nodding. I suppose you did. The ghostly figure lifted his right arm, gazing at it with quiet remembrance. The limb was even more transparent than the rest of his form, likely because Naruto now carried it in his place. Naruto glanced at his own right arm, comparing it to Roru's before letting it drop back to his side. Roru did the same, exhaling softly before offering a small, knowing smile. Please forgive me for appearing to you like this. As you can see, I no longer have a physical form. Naruto's expression remained blank. Yeah, I got that much. Still not exactly thrilled about being here, though. Roru's smile faded slightly, regret flashing across his face. That is understandable, and it is my fault for not speaking with you sooner about your role in saving Hyrule. His voice grew firmer with resolve. I promise I will make it up to you. I will guide you, and help you find a way home. Naruto frowned, studying the man carefully. Was he serious? It wasn't like he had much of a choice either way. If there was even a chance that Roru was telling the truth, he had to consider it. At the very least, he needed answers. All right, Roru continued. That arm should have allowed you to open this door, but it seems it has lost some of its power since I passed it on to you. Naruto looked down at his right hand, flexing his fingers. So you're saying this thing isn't at full strength? Correct. You can restore its power by seeking out places filled with sacred light, other shrines across this island. Naruto glanced around, spotting a familiar stone platform nearby, glowing faintly with the same green energy. Then, further in the distance, 3 more shrines, each perched on different floating landmasses. Great, more climbing. Filing that away for later, Naruto turned back to Roru. Alright, I get it. But before I go shrine hopping, I need you to explain a few things. Roru gestured for him to continue. I keep hearing about Link and Zelda, Naruto said. But I barely know anything about what I'm supposed to be doing. What was Link meant to do? Why am I taking his place? And more importantly, how does that help me get home? Roru stroked his chin, studying Naruto with a thoughtful expression, carefully choosing his words. Zelda and Link were investigating the depths beneath Hyrule Castle. I do not know what they sought, but they uncovered the mummified corpse of Ganondorf, the very being I had sealed away. Naruto furrowed his brows. Who's Ganondorf, he thought. However, he stayed silent, letting Roru continue. The seal broke upon their arrival. Ganondorf reawakened, gravely injuring Link, while Zelda vanished. Roru's expression darkened. When Link appeared in the Sky Islands, the gloom within him spread too quickly. Despite his will, his body failed him within months. That is why I summoned you. You are here in his place, because he is gone. A heavy silence followed. Naruto clenched his fists but gave a small nod, urging Roru to continue. Link had many tasks ahead of him, his most crucial being to stop the darkness consuming Hyrule. Ganondorf has spread chaos across the land, and each kingdom suffers under its own curse. Only a true hero can hope to break them. Naruto exhaled sharply. Figures. Roru's tone softened. I won't demand you fix all of Hyrule's troubles, but you must be prepared to face Ganondorf. Naruto crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. Yeah, I had a feeling you'd say that. As for finding a way home, Roru continued, there are only 3 individuals who might possess such knowledge. Naruto perked up slightly. Finally, something useful. Ganondorf, Roru stated first, then quickly added, though I doubt he would share that information willingly. Naruto scoffed. Yeah, not exactly looking forward to a heart-to-heart with him. Zelda, Roru said next. But as you know, she remains missing. Naruto frowned. That complicated things. And finally, Purah. A brilliant mind and perhaps your best option. Naruto sighed. So my only lead is this Purah person. That wasn't exactly promising. But it was something. No, he had to believe he would find a way home. And if Zelda was the key, then that just meant he needed to find her first. Besides, he wasn't about to leave Hyrule in ruins. He wasn't that kind of person. Naruto clenched his fist. He would fix this mess, not just because he needed a way home, but because he was Naruto Uzumaki. A determined grin spread across his face. All right, Roru, even if you hadn't said anything, I probably would have found these problems on my own and fixed them just to get home. But now, there's no way I'm leaving this place before finishing what Link started. Roru smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. Thank you, Naruto, I hope you find your way home. With those final words, Roru's form faded, leaving Naruto alone once more. Naruto sighed, his grin fading as he turned toward the nearest shrine. He needed to move quickly. Without shelter or a place to sleep, even if he gathered all the food he could find, he would freeze without Kurama's warmth. His expression darkened as he thought about his old friend. He had regained half of Kurama's chakra during his fight with Sasuke, but he had used it all up. Now, his seal was empty, and Kurama was still trapped in that planetary devastation back in his world. Shaking his head, Naruto pushed those thoughts aside. Dwelling on it wouldn't help, he had to focus on the problems in front of him. Maybe shadow clones were the answer. If he sent them to the shrines, he could gather all the sacred light at once while preparing to leave this place. The only issue was, he had never made shadow clones with just one hand. He had always used both. Still, maybe it wasn't too late to figure it out. Closing his eyes, Naruto focused on his chakra, raising his left hand as if forming the familiar cross seal. He molded his energy carefully, imagining his right hand was still there, unnoticed by him. A faint chakra projection of a hand formed in the air, completing the seal. With a familiar puff of smoke, 4 clones appeared before him. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he smirked, confidence surging. Am I awesome or what? His clones exchanged glances before replying in unison, or what? Naruto deadpanned. All right, he said, crossing his arms. Each of you head to a shrine and gather anything of interest inside or around them. I'll focus on collecting supplies. The clones gave a quick salute before vanishing in different directions. Naruto exhaled, glancing around before setting off to gather more materials. Time skip. Naruto now sat at the edge of another section of the Sky Island, smirking as he eyed a strange structure towering in the distance. It was a massive stack of giant boxes, the topmost section spinning as it emitted a blanket of red light. For the past few minutes, he had been watching it closely, fascinated by yet another thing he had never seen before. Another zone I construct, maybe? He wondered, or is this some kind of boss? Whatever it was, he figured he would have to take it down before moving on. Without hesitation, Naruto jumped down, landing right beside the towering structure. The moment the red light passed over him, the stacked boxes began shifting. The entire tower unraveled, rearranging itself into a massive, humanoid-shaped construct. It had no visible face, yet somehow, he could feel its attention locked onto him. Before he could react, the machine was suddenly above him, its massive arms, if they could even be called that, hurtling down toward him like a hammer. Whoa! Naruto barely managed to leap out of the way as the attack smashed into the ground, sending debris flying. He had no time to breathe. The construct began stomping toward him, each step sending out powerful shockwaves. The force nearly knocked him off his feet, but he twisted his body and barely managed to stay upright. What is this thing? He muttered. His question went unanswered as the machine struck again, this time with speed that rivaled a shinobi's. Naruto barely had time to register the attack before an enormous, block-like fist slammed into him. The force sent him flying, his body hurtling backward toward the island's edge. He dug his heels into the ground, skidding just in time to stop himself from falling off. As he caught his breath, the construct stood motionless, almost as if it was taunting him. Naruto scowled. All right, so I can't use jutsu, and I don't have Kurama to back me up. How do I beat this thing? His mind raced with ideas, but none of them felt solid. He didn't know how tough this thing was, but he doubted an imperfect Rasengan would do much. Guess I'll just have to test what works. With that, Naruto sprinted forward, ducking and weaving past the construct's attacks as it gave chase. After several close calls, he started noticing something, a section of the construct that looked different. It was more intricately designed than the rest, and faint pulses of energy coursed through it, spreading into the other blocks that made up its body. Naruto smirked. Looks like I found your weak spot. But just as he locked onto the intricately designed core, the construct adapted. Its entire body shifted, the blocks rearranging in an instant. What had once been a humanoid form now deconstructed itself into a chaotic mass of floating pieces, all rotating around that glowing core like a bizarre puzzle in motion. Naruto clicked his tongue. So you can switch forms? Huh, that's just cheating. The core, now harder to reach, pulsed once. Then, as if responding to his words, the construct's floating block snapped into place, forming a massive cube. Naruto barely had time to process before the cube launched itself at him. Shit, he dove out of the way just in time, the cube slamming into the ground with enough force to shake the entire island. The moment it landed, the construct immediately broke apart again, its blocks spiraling in different directions before realigning into its humanoid form. Naruto's mind raced. Okay, it can swap between different formations, but that core is definitely the key. If I can just land a solid hit on it. His thoughts were cut short as the construct lunged at him once more, swinging one of its massive arms. This time, instead of dodging, Naruto took a risk. He sprinted toward the attack. As the blocky fist came crashing down, Naruto used his momentum to leap onto the arm, his feet landing on the smooth, stone-like surface. For a second, he felt a flicker of triumph, then the arm disassembled beneath him. Oh, come on. The blocks that made up the construct's arm scattered, leaving Naruto in free fall. He twisted in midair, barely catching himself by slamming his hand against one of the still floating blocks. Using his chakra, he clung to the surface before flipping onto another piece. Climbing as fast as he could, the construct, however, wasn't having any of it. The moment Naruto tried to get closer to the core, the blocks violently shook, trying to throw him off. Naruto gritted his teeth. If that's how you want to play it, instead of trying to stabilize himself, he used the momentum of the shaking to propel himself forward, launching off one of the blocks just as the construct reformed its body, his eyes locked onto the glowing core. Gotcha. He reeled his fist back, ready to punch straight into the weak spot, only for the construct to split apart again, the core vanishing behind another shifting mass of blocks. Naruto's attack hit nothing but air. He cursed as he tumbled downward, landing hard on the stone platform below. He barely had time to roll back onto his feet before the construct struck again, this time shifting into a wall of blocks and slamming down toward him like a giant hammer. Naruto darted to the side, panting slightly. This thing learns fast. He needed to rethink his approach. If the construct could keep changing its shape whenever he got close, then attacking head-on wouldn't work. He smirked. Guess it's time for some ninja tricks. Focusing on his chakra, he quickly formed a single-handed cross seal. The moment he did, 3 shadow clones puffed into existence. Alright, listen up, Naruto said quickly. That thing keeps switching its body whenever I try to get close. So here's the plan. The clones nodded before dashing in different directions, each one moving to attack from a different angle. The construct shifted, seemingly confused by the multiple threats. Then, as expected, it reformed its humanoid shape and lashed out, this time at the clones. That was its mistake. As the construct swung, Naruto used the distraction to leap up from behind, pushing off a stray floating block to launch himself toward the core. This time, he wouldn't miss. He twisted midair, focusing his chakra into his palm. And with a clenched fist, he sprung in, his attack connected, and he let out a battle cry. The moment his chakra made contact with the core, the entire construct shuddered. The blocks around it quaked violently as the force of the punch began drilling into the weak point, but instead of breaking apart, the construct did something new. The blocks around the core collapsed inward, forming an impromptu armor around the weak spot, cutting off the full force of the fist. The remaining blocks twisted together into an arm, slamming into Naruto mid-attack and sending him flying once again. Naruto tumbled across the ground before skidding to a stop. He groaned, pushing himself up. Man, this thing just won't go down easy, huh? The construct stood motionless for a moment, as if processing his latest attack. Then, in an almost deliberate movement, it raised both of its massive arms. Naruto's eyes widened as a red glow formed between them. Oh, that can't be good. A moment later, a beam of pure energy blasted toward him. Naruto's instinct screamed at him to move. He barely had time to react before the beam of red energy tore through the air, cutting straight through the stone platform where he had stood a second ago. The sheer force of it sent him flying backward, the heat scorching the edges of his jacket. That's new, Naruto yelled, twisting midair and landing in a rough roll. He skidded to a stop, panting as he glanced back. A massive chunk of the battlefield was now gone, obliterated by the blast. The construct wasn't playing around anymore. All right. so it can fire energy blasts now. As if it wasn't already enough of a problem, Naruto's mind raced. He needed a way to disable its ability to shift forms before he could get another clean hit on that core. His last attack had done something, he could tell from the way the construct had frozen for a moment, but it wasn't enough. Maybe if he hit it with an even stronger attack. Another beam fired. Naruto's eyes snapped up just in time to see the red light coming straight for him. No time to dodge. Fine, time to test something. Instead of moving, Naruto braced himself, slamming his foot into the ground and crossing his arms. As the beam neared, he poured chakra into his palm. Then caught the blast. The impact sent a shockwave through his entire body. His arms burned from the sheer force, his feet dragging against the stone. But he held on, chakra flaring wildly as he redirected the energy, twisting his body at the last second to throw the beam to the side. It carved a deep trench into the ground, missing him entirely. Naruto exhaled sharply, shaking his arms out. Okay, good to know I can do that. The construct, however, wasn't about to give him time to celebrate. Its blocks shifted again, this time taking the form of a massive floating fortress, with the core tucked deep inside its structure. Hiding again, Naruto smirked, rolling his shoulders. You're making me work for this, huh? He formed another one-handed seal. This time, 6 clones appeared. Alright, you guys know what to do, he said. The clones grinned. Distract, disrupt, and destroy? Exactly. In a blur of motion, the clones scattered, attacking from all sides. One went high, leaping onto the shifting blocks. Another ran along the edges, throwing debris to test the construct's reactions. The rest feinted attacks, forcing it to divide its focus. Naruto, meanwhile, circled around, watching carefully. The construct had to shift at some point. The moment the construct reconfigured to swat away 2 clones, it left the core slightly exposed. Naruto didn't waste a second. He sprinted forward, chakra surging through his legs as he leaped onto one of the floating blocks. The second his feet touched the surface, he pushed off, using the momentum to vault higher. Another clone popped into existence mid-air, grabbing Naruto's arm and throwing him even further. The core loomed ahead. Naruto twisted, channeling all of his chakra into his palm. Take this, Rasengan. The familiar sphere of imperfect spiraling energy smashed into the core with full force. This time, there was no blocking it. The moment his attack connected, the construct froze. The intricate patterns on its core flickered violently, the energy pulsing out of sync. Then, with a massive shockwave, the entire structure detonated. Naruto barely had time to throw up his arms before the explosion sent him tumbling backward. When he finally regained his footing, he looked up, just in time to see the remaining blocks disintegrate into golden particles, fading into the sky. The battlefield was silent. Then, yes, Naruto pumped his fist. Who's awesome? I'm awesome. A lone clone, still standing, rolled his eyes. Yeah, just go collect the loot already. Naruto grinned. Right. He turned, eyeing the glowing remains of the construct's core. It had left behind something, probably another Zonai charge. As he walked toward it, he smirked to himself. This world might be strange, but at least the fights were fun. Before Naruto could bask in his victory any longer, 4 more clones appeared in puffs of smoke, the original 4 he had sent to the shrines about an hour ago. If they were back, that meant it was time to move on. But first, he needed to see exactly what they had found. From them, Naruto gained a wealth of new abilities and tools. Chrono Grip allows him to use energy to grab, move, rotate, attach objects together, and manipulate their flow of time to reverse or fast forward themselves or their properties, opening up new possibilities for both combat and creation. Forge enhances, creates, and fuses weapons, shields, bows, and arrows using any materials he finds. Phantom Step lets him phase through solid surfaces, bypass obstacles, and reposition instantly in combat. In addition to these abilities, his clones had gathered several useful items: an infinite storage bag, similar to a shinobi storage seal but capable of holding an unlimited amount without adding weight, several Zonai devices, ancient constructs with a variety of functions, a Zonai cell belt, designed to store and supply extra energy to Zonai devices, ensuring they wouldn't run out of power at a critical moment. A handful of Zonai charges, which could be used to replenish energy reserves when needed. Naruto smirked as he took everything in. With these new abilities and gear, surviving in this strange world was going to be a whole lot easier. On top of that, with the abilities he had gained, his arm was now nearly at full power. That meant he should have more than enough strength to open the door in the time shrine, especially since his clones had already taken care of all 4 shrines for him. But before he left, he wanted to have some fun with his new arm. Naruto threw up a shield from his bag, letting it float in the air before using Phantom Step, phasing through the shield while it was still airborne, before jumping off to a higher sky island, and then grabbing the shield midair with Chrono Grip. Naruto grinned. That was fun. He began to wonder what the limits of his arm's new powers were and exactly how Phantom Step and his other abilities worked. With that thought, Naruto decided to test out the limits of each ability. Judging by the sun's position, he had at least 2 hours to goof around before leaving this place to find a village or town. The blonde ended up messing with the Zonai constructs, mainly the hostile ones, by throwing them up in the air with Chrono Grip before reversing their movement and slamming them into the ground at high speed. Another thing he did was test the extremes of Phantom Step. He figured out that at certain angles, he could phase through walls. And while it wasn't in the name, he could also descend as well, provided he adjusted his positioning correctly. Chrono Grip was one of the most battle-based abilities he had ever seen. He threw weapons, then used Chrono Grip to recall them back to his hand, causing damage to anything in their path. He could also choose specific aspects of what was recalled instead of recalling the whole object. Even more, he could fast-forward objects, giving them an intense speed boost. He was sure there were other ways to use Chrono Grip, but he had to figure them out. Next was Forge. Naruto didn't even need to explain how useful it was, and the limitations weren't as bad as most would think. Creating and enhancing weapons was a game-changer, and as long as he had materials, he could make anything he needed. Another thing about Chrono Grip that he liked, was how he could connect Zonai devices to allow them to work in tandem. While currently, he only had a few fans, flamethrowers, and a glider, he was sure combining these with other items or Zonai tech would make them even better, which is why he spent some time attaching fans to the helmets of constructs. This trick sent most of them flying, as constructs were practically connected to their helmets, and it earned a quick laugh from the blonde. The best part about these abilities was that they could be upgraded. That made this arm all the more interesting. After his few hours were up, Naruto made his way towards the Shrine of Time. And without any hesitation, he placed his hand on the glowing green symbol. The energy of the shrine pulsed in response. The massive stone doors trembled before slowly beginning to part, revealing the chamber beyond. A rush of ancient energy filled the air, and Naruto felt his Zonai arm resonate with the shrine's power. Stepping inside, he found himself in a vast, dimly lit hall, its walls adorned with intricate Zonai engravings. The glow of the ancient markings flickered as if reacting to his presence. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, upon which rested a construct unlike any he had encountered before. Unlike the hostile sentries he had been messing with earlier, this one exuded a sense of authority. Its frame was sleeker, its armor plated with golden inlays, and its eye pulsed with a deeper, almost intelligent light. As Naruto approached, the construct shifted, straightening its posture before speaking in a deep, resonating tone. Bearer of the Zonai's gift, you stand before the gate of the first ascendant. To proceed, you must prove your mastery of the power entrusted to you. Naruto tilted his head, so basically, a test. He cracked his knuckles, a smirk tugging at his lips. Fine by me. The construct raised its arms, its plating shifting as weapons formed from within, one a glowing energy blade, the other a massive reinforced shield. Its eye locked onto Naruto, and in an instant, it lunged forward. Naruto reacted instantly, activating Phantom Step to phase backward, avoiding the initial strike. The construct's blade slashed through the space where he had just been, carving a faint glowing arc in the air. Not wasting a second, Naruto retaliated. He grabbed a broken chunk of stone with Chrono Grip, reversing its time flow and sending it flying back into the air before accelerating it forward at high speed toward the construct. The Guardian tilted its shield at an angle, deflecting the projectile effortlessly before closing the distance again. Naruto grinned, "Guess I'll have to get creative." He tossed a kunai, then immediately activated Chrono Grip, but instead of reversing it, he fast-forwarded it, tripling its speed. The sudden acceleration caught the construct off guard, and the kunai scraped against its plating, leaving a faint mark. The Guardian, undeterred, thrust its shield forward, and to Naruto's surprise, it expanded outward, splitting into multiple floating segments that surrounded him. Before he could react, they shot toward him like homing projectiles. Naruto activated Phantom Step, phasing through the first barrage before using Chrono Grip on the remaining segments, halting them mid-flight and sending them spiraling away. The construct adjusted, recalibrating its stance. Its energy blade pulsed, shifting into a longer, spear-like form as it lunged once more. Naruto met the attack head-on, using Chrono Grip to slow the spear's momentum before closing in. With a flick of his hand, he summoned a Rasengan, but instead of striking outright, he fast-forwarded its energy, causing the swirling chakra to accelerate violently. The air cracked as he slammed the overclocked Rasengan into the construct's shield. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber, causing the engravings on the walls to glow even brighter. The fight was only getting started. The force of the impact sent Naruto skidding backward, his feet barely finding purchase on the stone floor. The construct, despite the overwhelming power of his fast-forwarded Rasengan, managed to hold its ground, though its shield now bore a visible crack. Naruto's grin widened, "So you can take a hit." "Huh." The Guardian construct recalibrated, its golden inlays glowing brighter. Its shield segments retracted, reforming into a single piece, but this time, they began shifting and reshaping, turning into a massive warhammer. Before Naruto could react, the construct slammed the weapon into the ground, sending a shockwave of pure force rippling outward. The entire chamber trembled. Naruto instinctively phantom stepped upward, phasing through the ceiling for just a moment before emerging above the battlefield. As he dropped back down, he used Chrono Grip to grab the shattered remains of the stone floor and reverse them, reconstructing a temporary platform mid-air, landing lightly on his makeshift foothold. Naruto looked down at the Guardian, whose eye locked onto him. "All right, let's see how you handle this." Naruto reached into his storage bag, pulling out a set of wooden kunai before hurling them at the construct in rapid succession. Mid-flight, he activated Chrono Grip, fast-forwarding their speed to near-invisible blurs. The Guardian deflected most of them with precise, calculated movements, but two managed to pierce into its armor. Taking advantage of the opening, Naruto extended his hand, activating Chrono Grip again, not on the kunai, but on the construct itself. He focused, attempting to reverse its time, even if only for a moment. The Guardian shuddered, its body glitching as portions of its armor flickered between its current state and a previous undamaged one. It resisted, but Naruto saw an opportunity. Gotcha. He leaped forward, summoning another Rasengan, but this time, he used Chrono Grip mid-spin, rapidly accelerating and compressing the chakra within the sphere. The normally swirling mass became denser, vibrating with unstable energy. He slammed it into the construct's core. For a split second, time seemed to pause. Then, boom, a deafening explosion rocked the shrine, sending shockwaves in all directions. The Guardian staggered, its golden inlays flickering erratically. Then, with one final flicker, its energy faded, and it collapsed onto one knee. Naruto landed, breathing slightly heavier but still grinning. Well, that was fun, way better than that blocky construct. The shrine's chamber rumbled once more. The engravings on the walls flared to life, and the construct, now motionless, began to disintegrate into glowing particles. At the center of the room, where the Guardian once stood, a pedestal rose from the floor. Upon it lay a shimmering orb of Zonai energy. Naruto reached out, his hand making contact with the glowing symbol. A surge of energy pulsed through his arm before dispersing into the air. A deep, ancient voice echoed through the chamber. "You have proven your mastery, the path forward is open." His arm resonated once more, glowing faintly as if guiding him toward the massive doors ahead. Looking over the downed construct, Naruto smirked. He was finally free to leave and begin his real journey, but before stepping forward, he turned, sensing a familiar presence. "Hey Roru," I opened the door. "We can finally get out of here and find Zelda." Roru gave a small smile but shook his head, confusing the blonde, who stared at him with furrowed brows. "I cannot leave Naruto," Roru said, closing his eyes for a moment before gazing at the young shinobi once more. Naruto raised an eyebrow, curiosity filling him. "What do you mean you can't come?" he asked, crossing his arms. "You said you'd guide me." Roru nodded, but his smile faded. He glanced past Naruto, his ethereal gaze fixated on something far beyond the chamber. Unbeknownst to the blonde, he was looking at a dragon soaring past the opening Naruto had just created. "I know what I said," Roru admitted, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "But it seems impossible for me to leave this place. I don't have enough energy left to maintain my presence. If I push myself any further, I may disappear entirely." Naruto looked down, a strange weight settling in his chest. From the moment he first heard Roru's voice, he had wanted to know more about the mysterious being who had put him here. And now, after spending time together, however brief, Naruto had begun to see him as something more than just a spectral creature. He had hoped Roru could become like Kurama, an enemy turned friend. A presence that remained with him through thick and thin. But it seemed that, once again, he would have to walk this path alone. Naruto let out a sigh before crossing his arms and smirking. "Fine, I'll go on my own," he said, a familiar confidence in his voice. "Not like this is my first time on a crazy journey." He turned toward the open doorway, but before stepping through, he glanced back one last time. "I'll see you later Roru. When I beat Genin, maybe I'll figure out a way to get you a physical form." Roru let out a small chuckle, his ghostly presence flickering slightly in the dim light. Naruto took a deep breath, stepping through the new massive doorway and out into the open world beyond. The bright sunlight momentarily blinded him as he adjusted to the vast landscape stretching before him. The blonde then turned back toward the shrine's entrance one last time, sensing Roru's presence still lingering. The ghostly figure of the unknown guide stood just beyond the threshold, his expression calm yet unreadable. Naruto crossed his arms. "So, I guess this is goodbye." Roru nodded. "For now, but I have faith you will find your way Naruto. You have already proven your adaptability, the challenges ahead will test you further, but I believe you will overcome them." Naruto huffed, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, I've been through plenty of crazy stuff before. This is just a new kind of weird." Roru chuckled softly before his expression turned more serious. "Remember, you are not alone, there are those who will aid you, just as you will aid them. Seek out Zelda, and you will find the answers you need." Naruto smirked but gave a small nod. "Fine, I'll figure this out. And when I do, I'll make sure you get to see it too, old man." Roru smiled at that, his form beginning to fade into golden light. "Then go Naruto, your journey truly begins now." With that, the spirit disappeared, leaving Naruto standing alone before the shrine. Letting out a breath, he turned toward the small stone pathway leading away from the Shrine of Time. A faint glow caught his eye, a smaller shrine nearby, pulsing with the same gold energy as the larger one. "Guess that's my next stop," he muttered, stretching his arms before making his way toward it. Naruto took a few slow steps forward, almost as if the smaller shrine was calling out to him. Faint whispers echoed in his mind, their voices rising and fading in waves as he drew closer. The pattern repeated, soft murmurs swelling, then falling into silence, until he finally reached the glowing shrine. At its center, resting atop the stone, was a small golden sphere of energy. It pulsed gently, radiating warmth, and the whispers emanated from within. For a moment, Naruto simply stared, unsure of what it wanted from him. The voices were familiar, reminiscent of how Roru had first spoken to him. Then, amidst the indistinct whispers, one word came through clearly: sword. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He didn't need to be told twice. Reaching into his storage bag, he pulled out the corroded master sword, its once proud blade now reduced to a fractured remnant. Holding it forward, he watched as the golden energy extended toward it, wrapping around the broken weapon. the glow intensified, then, in an instant, both the energy and the master sword vanished, the clouds near the bottom of the island parted, almost like the barrier that had been stopping Naruto from before was gone, and if that wasn't enough, the kind voice, the first voice he heard when waking up, called to him once more, "I'm out there, Naruto, find me." Naruto raised an eyebrow, staring at the empty space where the sword had just been. He didn't dwell on it. Instead, he turned toward the edge of the shrine, taking in the open sky below. With a smirk, he bent his knees and leapt off, diving into the unknown just as he had countless times before. Naruto plummeted through the sky, the wind rushing past him, ruffling his hair as the fading sunlight cast a golden glow over the horizon. His grin was wide, excitement buzzing through him as he stretched out his limbs, fully embracing the freefall, even as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. He kept his head high. Below, a vast landscape stretched out before him, rolling fields, winding rivers, towering mountains. But his focus was locked onto one thing, a large lake directly beneath him, the perfect landing spot to cushion his descent. Tilting his head slightly, he scanned the horizon, spotting multiple settlements scattered across the land. Some looked grand, possibly kingdoms, while others seemed like smaller villages. From this height, it was hard to tell. But one thing was clear, the nearest settlement, though small, was his best chance to find answers. With that decision made, Naruto shifted his posture, tucking his arms to his sides and angling himself into a streamlined dive. The wind roared louder in his ears as he picked up speed, hurtling toward the shimmering water below, ready to begin his journey. With a loud splash, Naruto finally broke free from the sky's grasp, plunging into the cool embrace of the lake. As he surfaced, he took a deep breath, wiping water from his face before turning his gaze to the world before him. Rolling grassy plains stretched far into the distance, dotted with patches of vibrant wildflowers. Small forests lined the horizon, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of earth and greenery, so much like home, yet entirely unfamiliar. A grin spread across his face. Now this is a world worth exploring. He had already marked the location of the nearby village during his descent. It was close enough that he could make the trip in the morning without rushing, but for now, there was no need to hurry. This was a new world, untouched by his footsteps, and there was no way he was going to let it remain unseen. With that thought, Naruto stepped forward, ready to lose himself in the adventure that awaited. The blonde trekked through the plains. He kept his senses sharp, scanning the environment for anything unusual. It wasn't long before he stumbled upon a group of strange creatures loitering near a broken-down cart. They were squat, goblin-like monsters. Standing at around half Naruto's height, with piggish snouts and oversized ears that twitched at every little noise. Their skin varied between deep red and murky blue, and their eyes gleamed with an eerie yellow light. They carried crude weapons, splintered wooden clubs, jagged stone blades, and rusted swords that looked like they had been scavenged from old battlefields. A few of them had makeshift armor, wooden planks tied together with rope, or scraps of metal strapped haphazardly to their bodies. Naruto crouched behind a boulder, watching as they rummaged through the remains of the cart. From their chatter and excited grunts, they had clearly found something worthwhile. But what really caught his attention was how they moved, despite their clumsy appearance. They were quick, alert, and seemed to communicate through sharp grunts and growls. So, they're smarter than they look. Naruto decided to test them. He grabbed a small rock and flung it past the group. It clattered against a fallen log, and the nearest creature snapped its head toward the sound, its ears twitching. With a sharp grunt, it gestured to two others, who immediately ran to investigate. Interesting, they're coordinated. Grinning, Naruto dashed forward before they could notice him, closing the distance between himself and the distracted creatures. As soon as he was within range, he burst into action. The nearest red-skinned goblin barely had time to turn before Naruto's fist slammed into its gut, sending it flying backward. The others shrieked in alarm, gripping their weapons tightly. One of them lunged at him with a rusted sword. Naruto ducked low, avoiding the wild swing, then grabbed an old wooden shield from the wreckage with chrono grip and hurled it at another creature, knocking it off balance. A blue-skinned goblin, slightly taller than the rest, snarled and swung a massive wooden club. Naruto smirked and sidestepped the strike, then used chrono grip to freeze the club mid-air for just a moment before letting it drop. The sudden loss of weight made the goblin stumble forward, leaving it open for a devastating uppercut that sent it crashing onto its back. The remaining goblins hesitated, realizing they were outmatched. One let out a panicked screech and turned to run. Naruto dashed forward and, in one smooth motion, leaped over it, flipping in midair before landing right in its path. The goblin skidded to a stop, eyes wide with fear, before Naruto delivered a quick spin kick that sent it tumbling into a nearby tree. The battlefield fell silent. Naruto exhaled, stretching his arms as he looked around at the defeated creatures. All right, not too tough, but they work well together. Now that the fight was over, he turned his attention to the cart. Most of it had been picked clean, but a few scattered supplies remained. Among them were several odd-looking plants, some with bright blue leaves, others with glowing yellow bulbs. Naruto inspected the strange herbs closely, rubbing the leaves between his fingers and sniffing them cautiously. The blue-leafed plant had a crisp, almost minty scent, while the glowing yellow bulbs gave off a faint warmth, like they were holding onto stored energy. Weird, these might be useful for something. With that in mind, he carefully tucked them away in his storage bag before scanning the area for anything else worth taking. The cart itself was too damaged to be of any use, but scattered around it were several broken arrows, a dented pot, and a few small pouches of what looked like dried food. He took what seemed salvageable, though he wasn't about to test the food without knowing how long it had been sitting there. Once satisfied, he moved deeper into the wilderness, keeping his eyes peeled for more materials. As he walked through a patch of tall grass, he spotted another set of herbs growing near the base of a tree, this time with dark red leaves and jagged edges. He knelt down and plucked a few, noting the bitter, almost spicy smell they gave off. This one's different, maybe it's good for medicine, or poison. He grabbed a few more before standing and moving on. Further ahead, he came across a rocky outcrop with shimmering veins of or running through it. Naruto grinned. He'd seen plenty of miners back home work with stuff like this. If he could break some off, it might come in handy. Looking around, he found a decent-sized rock, weighed it in his palm, then chucked it at the outcrop with all his strength. The impact cracked off a few jagged chunks of ore, revealing dull metallic pieces within. He picked them up, feeling their weight could be useful for forging weapons later. After storing the pieces away, he continued exploring, keeping an eye out for more useful materials. This was how his exploration went. Naruto would find some sort of monster camp, fight them off, and explore the surroundings near the camp. He found many things of use, taking on materials, herbs and food, things he might need for training his abilities, old and new. Every step further into this world was a step toward survival, and he wasn't about to let anything go to waste. And he continued this, until morning, where he finally decided it was time to go towards the small village. Naruto stood just outside the village walls, sitting by a hill as he scouted the place out. Should he just walk in? The blonde asked himself. The idea of a ninja waltzing right into a village kinda seemed idiotic, but with what he understood with his place in the world, it would be more suspicious for him to sneak in and get caught, than to just walk in. But at the same time, he could be refused entry. This was the worst part about going in blind. He had thought when if left that Roru had given all the info he needed, but he was so impulsive, that he didn't think to ask about how people here would react to outsiders. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't like home, where he could just stroll into any town as a known ninja. Here, he was an unknown factor. For all he knew, they might assume he was some kind of bandit or monster and attack him on sight, but standing out here all night wouldn't get him anywhere either. He had two choices: go in confidently and act like he belonged, or find a way to gather information first. His eyes drifted toward a merchant wagon rolling up to the village gates. The guards gave it a brief check before waving it through. That gave him an idea. He could just approach like any wandering traveler looking for a place to rest. No sneaking, no unnecessary risks. Decision made, Naruto dusted himself off and adjusted his gear before making his way down the hill. With a relaxed yet purposeful stride, he approached the village entrance, ready to figure out his next move. As he walked, he maintained a friendly, non-threatening demeanor, but the weapons strapped to his back still gave him the unmistakable air of an adventurer. When he reached the village gate, 2 guards stood watch. They didn't seem particularly capable, more ceremonial than anything, an observation that made Naruto raise a mental eyebrow. Still, he chose not to linger on it. Instead, he lifted a hand in greeting, offering a small, easygoing smile. "Link, you're back," one of the guards exclaimed. Naruto blinked. Wait, what? Sure, he was here in Link's place, but there was no way they could actually mistake him for the guy. Wait, I'm not. Naruto started, only to be completely ignored. "Where have you been? We've all been worried sick." Naruto sighed, trying again. "Listen, I'm not. Last anyone saw, you and Princess Zelda were investigating the gloom." Princess, gloom. Naruto barely had time to process that before the other guard jumped in, and then, after just a few minutes inside the castle, it rose into the sky. "Purah's been beside herself trying to find you. You should go to her lab now, let her know you're safe." At that, Naruto stopped trying to explain himself. Clearly, they weren't listening. But hearing Purah's name reminded him of what Roru had said. She was his best lead. Clearing up this misunderstanding could wait. Now that he took a better look, this place felt more like a fortified base than a proper village. There were no homes, aside from a strange tower on one side and Purah's lab across from it. The training area only had a single boy practicing alone, and the shop stocked little more than apples and arrows, things Naruto already had in abundance. It didn't take much to realize this wasn't meant to be a permanent settlement. But from the way people carried themselves, it was clear they had nowhere else to go. Naruto exhaled and turned his attention to the lab. If this was the state of things, he had his work cut out for him. His gaze followed the lone staircase leading up to the lab, oddly positioned against the barrier wall. With a quiet huff, he took the steps 2 at a time, stopping just before the door. An eerie sense of the unknown lingered beyond it, a feeling he was all too familiar with. But he had long since learned how to stay calm in moments like this. Even as his hand hovered over the door handle, the strange feeling of unease only grew stronger. Before he could push it aside, a voice suddenly called out behind him, "Master Link, you're back." Naruto froze mid-motion, gritting his teeth. It hadn't even been 10 minutes, and he was already being mistaken for Link again. Before he could turn around and correct them, the voice, clearly belonging to a young woman, grew even more excited. Purah, he's back. Link's back." Naruto barely had a second to react before a loud crash sounded from inside the lab, followed by the rapid thumping of footsteps. The door burst open so forcefully that Naruto instinctively leaned back, narrowly avoiding getting smacked in the face. "Link, where the heck have you?" The woman's excited expression froze the moment she got a proper look at him. Her brow furrowed, goggles slipping slightly down her nose as she gave him a once-over. "Wait a sec, you're not Link." Naruto turned to the new arrival, guessing she was Purah, still a little shaken from almost getting his face taken off by the door. Now that he got a good look at her, he was surprised. With how Roru spoke of her, he'd been expecting some wise, old scholar. Instead, she looked young, early 20s, maybe even younger. She had long white hair tied up in a high ponytail, with a few loose strands framing her face. Resting on her head were oversized goggles with thick bronze rims and red lenses. Her crimson eyes, sharp and filled with energy, reflected both intelligence and enthusiasm. Her outfit was a mix of traditional Sheikah style and modern practicality, an off-white, sleeveless tunic with a high collar, decorated with intricate red and gold designs. A cropped, dark gray jacket with rolled-up sleeves added a contemporary flair, and a Sheikah symbol was emblazoned on her back. A thick belt cinched her waist, securing a pouch filled with research notes and tools. She also wore form-fitting black leggings and sturdy boots. Suited for someone constantly on the move, despite her small stature, Purah carried herself with undeniable authority. Every animated gesture, every sharp look, made it clear, this was a woman who didn't just command respect. She expected it, before Naruto even realized it, Purah was already scrutinizing him, circling him with a pencil in hand as if taking mental notes. She observed his posture, examined his strange right arm, and even took a moment to study the whisker-like marks on his cheeks. Her crimson eyes flicked over every detail, sharp and analytical, as if trying to piece together a puzzle. After completing a full circle around him, she stopped directly in front of him. Staring him down with an intense gaze, "Who are you?" she asked bluntly, as if she hadn't just invaded his personal space without hesitation. Naruto remained still, watching as Purah continued her assessment while her assistant, a much smaller woman, looked utterly confused. "Wait, Purah, isn't this Link?" the assistant asked hesitantly, drawing Naruto's attention. "No," Purah stated flatly, not even looking away from him. "I knew Link. He was about my height, and believe it or not, his eyes were more teal than straight blue. His hair was a little longer and had this neater, more kempt look to it. And he definitely didn't have whiskers last I checked, or that weird arm." She paused. Then added with a smirk, "Though, knowing him, he probably would get an arm like that." Naruto sighed. At least Purah could tell he wasn't Link. He'd have to figure out how she knew the guy later. Maybe she had been close to his predecessor. But right now, he needed her to stop inspecting him like he was some kind of threat. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Name's Naruto Uzumaki. And, from what I've been told, I'm supposed to take Link's place." The lab fell silent. Purah didn't react at first. She just stood there, her eyes narrowing slightly as she processed his words. The silence stretched longer than Naruto expected, and for a second, he wondered if he'd said something wrong. Her assistant was the first to break it. "Wait, replace Link, what do you?" But Purah suddenly raised a hand, cutting her off. Naruto watched as the researcher's expression shifted, not just in confusion, but realization. Her brows furrowed, lips pressing into a thin line as the weight of his words seemed to hit her all at once. He could practically see the gears turning in her head. That moment of realization was something Naruto had grown familiar with, when someone was forced to acknowledge that things weren't going back to the way they were. Naruto didn't say anything. He just let her sit with it, feeling the weight settle in. Then, after a beat, Purah exhaled, rubbing her temples. "That explains a few things," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "And complicates a whole lot more." Naruto crossed his arms. "Yeah, I'm getting that a lot." She didn't answer immediately, instead moving toward one of her cluttered workbenches, shuffling through scattered notes. Her assistant looked between them before hesitantly asking, "So, what happens now?" Naruto rolled his shoulders, glancing at Purah before scratching the back of his head. She recovered quickly, almost too quickly. He could tell she was masking what she really felt. He wasn't going to pry. If anything, he was surprised she hadn't demanded answers from him yet, letting out a short sigh. Naruto met her gaze with a blank frown. The situation didn't call for a reassuring smile or forced optimism. He barely knew this woman, but the least he could do was be upfront about why he was here. "Look, we should talk about this alone," he said, his voice steady. "Even if you won't admit it, I know you have questions." "I do too." Purah's eyes flickered away for a brief moment, just enough for Naruto to catch a hint of something deeper. Sorrow, doubt, it was gone before he could place it, replaced by a sharp, scrutinizing stare. She stepped in closer, eyes narrowing. "And how do I know you're not some kind of spy? With everything that's been happening, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary." Naruto shook his head with a sheepish smile, raising his hands in a show of harmlessness. "No spy here, honestly, I just want to talk and figure some stuff out." For several tense seconds, Purah didn't move. Her sharp eyes scanned every minute detail of his face, his posture, his breathing, even how his hair shifted in the wind. It wasn't just suspicion. She was analyzing him, breaking him down like a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Those few seconds stretched on endlessly, but finally, she exhaled and stepped back. "All right," she said, crossing her arms. "Come inside, Naruto Uzumaki. We'll talk in my lab, fewer people listening in that way." Naruto gave a slight nod as Purah turned on her heel, heading toward the entrance. He watched her go for a moment, lingering in thought. She was sharp, too sharp. Reminded him of a shinobi in that way. Her scrutiny felt a lot like dealing with Anko, up close and personal, completely unbothered by invading his space. Not to mention, she was, well, attractive. Which only made staying silent through her inspection harder. He blamed Jiraiya for that. The old man had definitely corrupted his perspective when it came to women, whether Naruto liked it or not. Are you coming or not? The assistant's voice cut through his thoughts. Snapping out of it, Naruto gave her a quick glance before stepping forward, following Purah inside and shutting the door behind him. As Naruto turned back, he found himself momentarily thrown off by the state of the lab. Notes were scattered everywhere, pinned haphazardly to the walls, stacked unevenly on the desk, and even littering the floor. The sight oddly reminded him of his own room back home, a realization that didn't exactly bring him comfort. If anything, it just made him dread the mess waiting for him when he got back. With a quiet sigh, he bent down and picked up a stray note from the floor, his eyes scanning over the text. Unknown to him it said, "The effects of gloom on the world." The problem was, the words were written in a language he didn't recognize. Even so, he studied it for a moment longer before setting it down on the desk where Purah now sat. Watching him with quiet interest, she finally spoke, her fingers laced together in front of her face. "What exactly did you want to talk about?" Naruto met her gaze, expression unreadable for a moment before he launched into his explanation. He told her everything he knew, about what happened to Link, about why he was here to replace him. He hesitated only briefly before deciding to reveal the truth about himself, that he wasn't from this world at all. To his surprise, Purah didn't scoff or dismiss the idea. If anything, she looked intrigued. She even admitted that she had long theorized the possibility of alternate worlds, and now, here he was, proof that she had been right all along. But despite her vast knowledge, she had nothing definitive on dimensional travel. Still, she reassured him. Hyrule was a land full of mysteries and ancient power. If a way home existed, he would find it here. Naruto hadn't expected an easy answer, but at the very least, he had given Purah some closure about Link. More importantly, he had told her who had taken him away. When they finished speaking, Purah fell silent, much like she had when she first realized Link was truly gone. But this time, there was something different about her expression, something closer to understanding, maybe even determination. Then, after a moment, she turned back to him with a sudden, almost mischievous smile. Like they had become friends without either of them realizing it. "That means you came from that new island in the sky, and this Roru you met, that's a name I only recognize as the first king of Hyrule." Naruto paused. First king of Hyrule, Roru was the first king of this place. He supposed that made sense. The guy was technically dead, spoke like some noble, and had that whole wise, all-knowing aura about him. Purah tapped a finger against her chin. "Now, I can't say for certain that they're one and the same, but it's the most likely conclusion. If that's true, then the story he told you about Link and Zelda must be tied to the upheaval. Hyrule Castle is still floating in the sky. Even now." Naruto frowned at that. He knew things were bad, but hearing that the whole castle was still hanging up there like some ominous threat made it feel worse. "It's also clear," Purah continued, adjusting her goggles, "that with the knowledge Roru gave you, Zelda isn't gone in the same way Link is. Instead, I suspect she's the voice you heard calling out when you first woke up and left the island." Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as he mulled over her words. If she was right, then Zelda was closer than he thought. Was she up there, somewhere in the sky? Did she cast some spell, or was it something else entirely? This world was full of strange things. At this point, he wouldn't rule anything out. "Well, either way," she said, "if you're really stepping in for Link and you have no idea where you are, that means you'll need someone to help you find your way around Hyrule." She straightened, tapping a finger against her chin before pointing at herself. "That someone will be me." She leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming with renewed energy. "I'll set up your Purah Pad's map, and I'll even do some digging on a way to send you home. But in return, you'll help me with my research. There's a lot happening in Hyrule that needs investigating." She smirked. "Besides, it works out in your favor. If you want to save this place like Link would have, my research will help you do exactly that." She extended a hand toward him. "So, what do you say?" Naruto blinked at her offer, his arms crossing as he processed her words. She was willing to help him just like that? Sure, it made sense that she'd want to look into his claims. He was proof of another world, after all, but offering to personally guide him around Hyrule and even research a way home for him? That was a lot for someone she'd just met. People didn't usually offer help without a reason. Is it because of Link? He wondered, maybe she felt some responsibility, like she had to support whoever was taking his place. Or maybe it was just her curiosity as a researcher pushing her forward. Either way, it didn't really matter. He wasn't about to turn down help, especially not from someone as sharp as her. Besides, Roru had pointed him in this direction for a reason. If there was anyone in this world he could trust to at least steer him in the right direction, it was her. Right now, he needed all the help he could get, and this was where he'd been sent. He didn't have many other options. Shaking the thought away, Naruto gave her a small grin. "All right, you got yourself a deal." His words put a smile on Purah's face, and she let her hand fall. "Well then, I guess you should get started." So soon, Naruto thought. Purah smiled at his outward reaction, a satisfied look on her face as she watched the blonde stare at her. "Mouth agape, you're fun to mess with," she said with a laugh. She then laid her head on her desk with a blank frown. "But seriously, you'll need to get to work quickly with everything Link has missed in his absence. You can explore around Lookout Landing for a bit, which is what we call this place, and I'll get you enrolled in our legal forces, allowing you to be in your own solo party." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Does that do anything?" he asked. Purah shook her head no, as much as she could while resting it on the desk, then turned to the only uncovered window in the room. "It really only serves to register you as someone who lives here temporarily. Although, a solo party is rare. So it'll earn you looks of respect and awe, and probably jealousy." To Naruto, it just sounded like the woman wanted to create drama in his life. How bored was she? "In any case, it will serve a small purpose, but once you're ready, I need you to head up to Hyrule Castle. There's a search party looking for Link and the princess. Captain Haas is leading it, so once you find him, give him the info you told me, only about Link and the princess, of course. I'll send you off with your party registration so there won't be any arguments. He might be suspicious of you, but he won't attack you. And from there, you can work with Haas to find the princess." How does that sound? Naruto grinned, smiling ear to ear as he gave a thumbs up. "I like it. Since they're already looking for Zelda, I can use that to find her. Maybe she'll have a way to get me back home." With that, Naruto turned to leave, letting Purah work on whatever she saw fit. He needed to be ready to go soon, but before he could step through the door, a hand on his shoulder stopped him. When he turned around, he found Purah staring into his eyes, her expression serious. Before he could question her, she spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. "Now, I know it's none of my business, especially since we just met and aren't friends or anything. But as your new guide, I have to ask, what will you do if you can't find a way back? What if Roru was wrong?" Naruto froze, her words stabbing into his chest like a dagger. His gaze shifted toward the door, his expression clouding over. Before the thoughts could fester, Purah spoke again, her tone softer but still firm. "You don't have to think about it right now, but while the princess knows more about magic than anyone in Hyrule, even me, she probably doesn't know anything related to this. And as your guide, I can't let you build yourself up for failure. Just, keep it in mind, okay?" Several seconds passed before Naruto gave a slow nod. Satisfied, Purah let him go and watched as he walked out of her lab. As Naruto stepped outside, the crisp air of Lookout Landing greeted him. But he barely noticed. His mind was stuck on Purah's words. What if Roru was wrong? He hadn't let himself consider that possibility, not seriously, anyway. Ever since he arrived in this strange world, he had moved forward with the assumption that there was a way back. There had to be. He had people waiting for him, responsibilities, a life that wasn't finished yet, but what if he was wrong? What if there really wasn't a way home? His hands clenched into fists. No, he couldn't afford to think like that. He had a lead now, Zelda. If anyone knew a way to break whatever weird magic had sent him here, it would be her. He just had to find her, that was the only thing that mattered. Still, as he looked out at the bustling camp, at the knights and researchers moving about, it hit him that if this was his new reality, he would have to find a way to live in it. He shook his head, forcing the thought away. One step at a time, Naruto. He would deal with that when, the time came. For now, he had a job to do. With that, he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and headed off to explore Lookout Landing. If he was going to be working with these people, he might as well get a feel for the place. The outpost was buzzing with activity. Knights in polished armor moved in coordinated patrols, researchers scurried between makeshift tents, and supply runners carried crates filled with everything from weapons to medical supplies. In the center of it all stood a massive wooden observation tower, its upper deck giving a clear view of the surrounding fields and the ominous, floating remains of Hyrule Castle in the distance. Naruto wandered, taking it all in. The place reminded him of the forward bases back home, hastily built but sturdy, filled with people too busy to stop and chat. He was about to move on when he spotted something interesting, a wide, circular stone platform in the ground, surrounded by metallic rails embedded into the earth. A single knight stood nearby, his posture stiff as he eyed Naruto's approach. "Yo. What's with the giant plate in the ground?" Naruto asked, pointing at the platform. "Some kinda training area?" The knight shook his head. "It's the emergency shelter. The platform lowers into an underground bunker in case of an attack or evacuation." Naruto's eyes widened. "Wait, lowers? Like a secret base? That's awesome." The guard exhaled sharply, clearly unimpressed by Naruto's enthusiasm. "It's not for sightseeing. Only authorized personnel and civilians in need are allowed inside." Naruto crossed his arms, glancing between the knight and the platform. "So, if I just stand on it, will it, drop down? Or do you need a secret handshake first?" The knight shot him a glare. "It's activated by a special mechanism. And no, you can't use it." Naruto clicked his tongue. "TCH, boring. You guys need to make this place more fun." The knight didn't dignify that with a response. Naruto snickered before backing off, still eyeing the shelter with curiosity. A hidden underground base, huh? He'd have to find a way to check it out later. After all, he was technically working for Purah now. Maybe that gave him a free pass. As he walked away, the scent of food and metal caught his attention. Following it, he found a small shop set up under a tent, with wooden crates stacked around a worn-out counter. A merchant, a scruffy-looking man with a bandana tied around his head, was arranging his wares, various weapons, tools, and small pouches that Naruto assumed were filled with supplies. "Yo, old man, whatcha got?" Naruto asked, leaning on the counter. The merchant gave him a once-over before smirking. "You're new around here, huh? I sell whatever a traveler might need, arrows, weapons, food, you name it." Naruto eyed a rusty sword leaning against one of the crates. "That thing looks like it'd break in one hit." The merchant let out a dry chuckle. "You're not wrong, but some folks make do with whatever they can find. Rupees are tight for a lot of people these days." Naruto patted his pockets, remembering he was completely broke. "TCH, guess I'll have to hit the free sample stand." The merchant laughed. "If you find one of those, let me know. Until then, better start earning rupees." Naruto gave him a wave and moved on. He wasn't too worried about money, he'd figure something out. He always did. As he wandered further, the sound of clashing wood caught his ear. Turning his head, he spotted a small training area near the outpost wall, where a few knights were sparring. But what really caught his attention was a kid, no older than 7 or 8, swinging a wooden sword with fierce determination. The boy's form was sloppy, his stance unbalanced, but the look in his eyes reminded Naruto of himself when he was that age. Naruto walked up and crossed his arms. "Hey, kid, what are you doing with that sword?" The boy stopped mid-swing and turned to Naruto with a serious expression. "I'm training. If I get strong, I can help fight the monsters." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Monsters, huh? And who told you that you had to fight?" The boy hesitated for a moment before gripping his sword tighter. "No one. But everyone here is helping, and I want to help too." Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Man, this kid reminds me of me. Alright. If you're gonna train, at least fix your stance," Naruto said, stepping closer. He nudged the boy's foot with his own. "Spread your feet a little more. Otherwise, one good hit will knock you on your butt." The kid blinked, then adjusted his stance. "And don't hold the sword so stiff, keep your grip firm but loose enough to move fast." The boy nodded, trying to copy Naruto's instructions. He swung again, this time with slightly better balance. Naruto smirked. "Not bad. Keep practicing like that, and maybe one day, you will be strong enough to fight monsters." The kid grinned. "I will. Thanks, mister." Naruto ruffled the kid's hair. "No problem, squirt." With that, he turned away, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. Even in a world that wasn't his own, some things never changed. With his curiosity satisfied, Naruto finally turned toward the outpost gates. He rolled his shoulders, cracking his knuckles with a determined smirk. Time to get to work. With that, got his party registration from Purah, before leaving towards Hyrule Castle. As Naruto left Lookout Landing, making his way toward Hyrule Castle, his thoughts drifted back to the whole party registration thing Purah had explained. With Hyrule in shambles, it wasn't just the knights holding things together anymore. Researchers, search parties, and monster hunters were all working to rebuild, but without any real order, things could easily fall apart. By registering everyone into a party system, Purah could track who was doing what and where, making sure efforts weren't overlapping or wasted. It also gave registered people more authority, access to secure areas, the ability to make official requests, and recognition from village leaders trying to rebuild. But what stood out to Naruto the most was how rare solo parties were. Almost no one was strong enough to handle the monsters roaming around alone. Most people worked in groups for safety, whether they were knights, hunters, or researchers with guards. The idea of a one-person team was nearly unheard of, and yet, Purah had just slapped that label on him without hesitation. Naruto clicked his tongue. TCH, figures she'd do something like that. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, being officially registered meant he wouldn't have to waste time explaining himself when he showed up somewhere. No one could question why he was snooping around if he had the documentation to back it up. But on the other hand, it also put a huge target on his back. People would expect him to be strong enough to handle things alone, and if he wasn't careful, it'd probably draw some jealousy or skepticism from others. Still, it wasn't like he had much choice. If this was the fastest way to find Zelda, and maybe a way back home, then he'd roll with it. With that thought, he picked up his pace, eyes set on the distant ruins of Hyrule Castle. The journey Hyrule Castle, or really the part of it that wasn't in the sky, was far from simple. Though the castle itself loomed in the distance, suspended ominously above the land, the path leading to it was anything but direct. Naruto followed the roads leading away from Lookout Landing. His eyes scanning the horizon as he took in this strange new world. The landscape was scarred, jagged cracks in the earth, floating debris lingering in the sky, and the remnants of buildings reduced to rubble. The damage was more than just physical. There was an eerie stillness in the air, a weight that settled in Naruto's chest the further he walked. This place had seen devastation, and if what Purah had said was true, then Link, the hero of this land, was gone. Naruto pulled his jacket tighter around himself as he walked. He knew what it was like to carry the expectations of a village, of a world even, but to fall in battle and leave those people behind? That wasn't something he wanted to think about right now. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A group of figures stood at a makeshift checkpoint near the path ahead. Soldiers, likely the ones stationed to guard the roads near the castle. Naruto approached cautiously, hands in his pockets, making sure not to seem threatening. As he got closer, one of the soldiers, a man clad in worn armor, his spear resting against his shoulder, stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he took in Naruto's appearance. "Halt, state your business," the soldier ordered. Naruto sighed, he had expected this. "I'm here to see the captain," he said simply, keeping his tone even. "Purah sent me." The soldier didn't look convinced. "Purah, huh, and who exactly are you?" "Name's Naruto Uzumaki." He crossed his arms, trying to seem as nonchalant as possible. "Look, I don't want to cause trouble, just point me to your captain." The soldier hesitated for a moment before exchanging glances with his comrades. After a brief pause, he gestured toward the path behind them. "You'll find Captain Ha's up ahead, near the castle gates," he said. "But don't expect a warm welcome, things are tense enough as it is." Naruto gave a nod of thanks and continued forward, his mind already preparing for the conversation to come. He had a feeling this wasn't going to be easy. If the captain was anything like the guards, getting him to trust Naruto was going to take some work. Naruto made his way through the outskirts of Hyrule Castle, now little more than broken stone and scattered ruins. The real castle loomed far above, floating ominously in the sky, a sight that still didn't sit right with him. The air here felt heavier, like the land itself was holding its breath. Soldiers moved with purpose, setting up makeshift camps, tending to the wounded, and keeping watch for any threats. Despite their discipline, there was a clear tension, like they were waiting for something to go wrong. Naruto spotted a group of knights near a supply tent, one of them standing out from the rest. His armor, while battered, bore the markings of a higher rank, and the way he carried himself, arms crossed, back straight, eyes sharp, screamed authority. That had to be the captain. Taking a breath, Naruto walked up, hands casually in his pockets. The captain's gaze landed on him immediately, narrowing slightly. "You're not one of my men," he stated. "Who are you?" Naruto stopped a few steps away. "Name's Naruto Uzumaki, Purah sent me." The captain's frown deepened. "Purah?" She didn't mention sending anyone. He gave Naruto a quick once-over, clearly unimpressed. "And why would she send you? I don't remember you from the old days of Hyrule, and your name screams foreign, which we have never had before." Naruto sighed, he was really getting tired of people sizing him up like this. "I'm not from around here, but I'm here to help, and I heard you're looking for Zelda." That made the captain's expression darken for a moment, but he masked it quickly. "We are, but so far, there's been no sign of her." Naruto hesitated, then decided there was no point in dancing around it. "There's something you should know, about Zelda and Link." The captain's posture stiffened slightly. "What about them?" Naruto took a breath. "Link's gone." For a second, the world felt still. The captain's face didn't change much, but Naruto saw the way his fingers clenched against his arms. "What?" "I don't know all the details, but I know he fought something strong. And he didn't make it." Naruto lied, meeting the man's gaze, steady despite the weight of his own words. "I'm sorry." The captain exhaled sharply, looking away. "Link was our strongest warrior. If he's gone," his jaw tightened before he looked back at Naruto. "And Zelda?" Naruto nodded. "She's still out there, somewhere." The captain studied him, suspicion creeping back in. "And you, if you're not from Hyrule, why do you care?" Naruto crossed his arms. "Because I promised to help. And because I know what it's like to fight for a place you care about." His gaze hardened. "Purah trusts me, that should be enough." The captain stared at him a moment longer before sighing. "Fine, if Purah thinks you're worth something. I won't argue. But don't expect me to just take your word for it." Naruto smirked, "Didn't expect you to." The captain turned, nodding toward the nearby village. "We're planning a mission to rescue civilians from monster camps. Meet us there, prove yourself, and we'll see if you're actually useful." Naruto grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Now that's more my speed." The captain gave a short nod before walking off, leaving Naruto standing there, staring up at the floating castle in the distance, his first real step toward proving himself in this world. Now, he just had to make it count. The night had fully settled over the Hyrulean plains, casting long shadows across the uneven terrain. Naruto exhaled sharply, standing at a crossroads of dirt paths, each one looking just as unhelpful as the last. "Seriously, how hard is it to give proper directions?" he muttered, rubbing the back of his head in frustration. The captain hadn't been too keen on specifics, just a vague mention of a monster camp past the ridge and near the old watchtower. Problem was, there were a lot of ridges, and the remains of old structures littered the landscape. Naruto had spent nearly an hour weaving through the darkened fields, keeping low whenever he spotted movement in the distance. A few times, he'd come across lone bokoblins or smaller groups of monsters, but none had seemed to be part of the larger force he was looking for. He was tempted to just charge one of them and shake answers out, but he doubted they were the talkative type. Eventually, he caught a faint glow in the distance, a collection of flickering lights, uneven and scattered. Torches. A campfire. And the faint silhouettes of figures moving in disciplined formations. Bingo! Naruto picked up the pace, keeping to the grass to muffle his steps. As he got closer, the tension in the air became more apparent. The camp wasn't a place of rest, it was a battlefield waiting to erupt. Now that he was near, he could see the soldiers gathered, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning the monster encampment ahead. The glow of the enemy's campfire cast eerie shadows along the wooden barricades, where larger figures stood as guards. Their guttural grunts and the occasional sharp bark of orders carried through the night. Naruto's gaze shifted to the group of armored soldiers standing just outside the monster camp's range. Among them, one figure stood out, his stance firm, his gaze locked ahead. Even without being told, Naruto could tell, this was the captain. He made his way forward, coming up behind the group, and the moment he stepped into the torchlight, the captain spoke without even turning around. "You're late." Naruto rolled his shoulders, suppressing the urge to groan. "Didn't know we were on a schedule." That earned him a sharp glance, though the captain quickly returned his focus to the camp. "Purah trusts you, I don't." He nodded toward the distant fires, where dark shapes moved in and out of sight. "That camp is filled with bokoblins and moblins. The smaller ones, the bokoblins, are dangerous in groups but easy to deal with alone. The bigger ones, those are moblins. Twice our size, thick-skinned, and strong enough to send a man flying with one hit. They're leading the camp, and they've taken civilians from the nearby villages." Naruto's eyes narrowed as he followed the captain's gaze. Now that he looked closer, he could see what the man meant. The smaller creatures scurried about, jittery and chaotic, while the towering ones stood like living walls of muscle, their deep-set eyes scanning for threats. "So, let me guess," Naruto said, crossing his arms. "We're going in there to get those people out?" The captain finally turned to face him fully. "That's the plan. I don't know what you're capable of, but I don't have time for dead weight. You follow orders, you fight when I say, and you don't get in the way." His gaze darkened. "If you can't handle that, walk away now." Naruto met his stare without hesitation. "Not happening." The two held their gaze for a moment before the captain exhaled through his nose. "Fine." He turned back to the camp, signaling to the others. "We move soon, stay close, and don't do anything reckless." Naruto smirked. "No promises." The captain gave him a look but didn't argue. Instead, he focused on the mission ahead, leaving Naruto standing there, watching the camp flicker in the distance. A real fight, a real test. And his first step toward earning the trust of this world. As soon as the signal was given, the Hylian soldiers surged forward, their movements swift and practiced. Naruto followed, keeping pace as they approached the outskirts of the monster camp. The firelight flickered against the wooden barricades, casting jagged shadows that danced across the dirt. The first clash came swiftly. A bokoblin near the entrance let out a startled squeal before barely raising its club, only for one of the soldiers to run it through with a spear. Its body crumpled to the ground with a gurgled grunt. But the sound was enough to alert the others. The camp exploded into chaos. Bokoblins shrieked, some scrambling for weapons while others blindly charged at the invading soldiers. Steel clashed against crude iron, the scent of burning wood and sweat filling the night air. Naruto didn't wait for orders. He darted forward, weaving through the battlefield with practiced agility. A bokoblin swung wildly at him, its club arcing through the air. Naruto ducked, pivoting around the creature before slamming his fist into its gut, sending it flying backward into a pile of crates. Another lunged from the side. Without hesitation, Naruto spun mid-air, his foot connecting with the monster's face. It crumpled instantly. The soldiers had started to push forward, their coordination slowly overpowering the disorganized bokoblins. But then came the real problem. A deep, guttural roar split through the night. Naruto turned just in time to see a towering moblin stomp forward, its beady eyes locked onto the intruders. It wielded a massive club, large enough to flatten a man in a single swing. One of the soldiers rushed forward, thrusting his spear at the creature's exposed side, but the moblin barely flinched. With one sweeping motion, it backhanded the soldier, sending him crashing into the dirt with a pained grunt. Naruto clicked his tongue. "All right, big guy, guess you're mine." The moblin turned its attention to him, exhaling through its nostrils as if it understood the challenge. Then, with surprising speed, it lifted its club and brought it down. Naruto jumped back just in time to avoid being turned into paste, the impact sending a shockwave of dust and splintered wood in all directions. He landed on the balls of his feet, eyes sharp. "Fast for your size," Naruto muttered, shaking out his hands. "Let's see how you handle this." He charged forward, chakra flaring instinctively as he ducked under another swing. He leaped onto the moblin's arm, running up its massive frame before twisting in midair. With a fierce yell, he brought his heel down onto the creature's skull. The moblin staggered, letting out a dazed growl. Naruto landed in a crouch, already pushing off the ground before the beast could fully recover. This time, he went for its legs. Channeling chakra into his strike, he swept its knee out from under it. The moblin roared in pain as it buckled, one hand slamming into the ground to catch itself. That's when the soldiers struck. Seizing the opportunity, they rushed in with spears and swords, driving their weapons into the beast's exposed torso. The moblin bellowed one last time before slumping forward, its weight shaking the earth as it finally collapsed. A tense silence followed, then, cheers. The remaining bokoblins, now leaderless, squealed and panicked before scattering into the night. The battle was won. Naruto exhaled, standing amidst the chaos, his body still buzzing from the fight. He glanced at the soldiers, who were now tending to the wounded and freeing the captured villagers. Then, he felt a heavy clap on his shoulder. The captain stood beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable for a moment, before he gave a small, approving nod. "You're reckless," he said gruffly. "But you fight well." Naruto smirked, rolling his shoulders. "I'll take that as a compliment." The captain didn't argue. Instead, he turned to oversee the soldiers, barking orders to secure the area. Naruto looked up at the night sky, the adrenaline still coursing through him. This wasn't his world, this wasn't his fight. But for the first time since arriving, he felt like he was starting to belong. With that, the celebration began. Once back at Lookout Landing, a party was held in honor of the freed civilians, open to everyone in the area. Naruto joined in, taking part in the festivities, singing, dancing, and, of course, drinking. Technically, he was still a teenager, but he had stopped being a child the moment he tied a shinobi headband around his forehead at 12. The only thing that dampened the night for him was the tragic lack of ramen. Somehow, there were plenty of finger foods, but not a single bowl of noodles in sight. Music, dancing, and laughter were great and all, but without ramen, it just didn't feel right. Still, the atmosphere was lively, the people joyous. Even the captain, a man Naruto had yet to see crack a smile, was actually enjoying himself. That alone made Naruto laugh, something he had been holding back all night. Before raising his mug and taking a long drink in salute to those they had saved, he was so caught up in the moment that he didn't notice the figure approaching from behind. Before he could react, his mug was suddenly snatched right out of his hands. Naruto spun around to see a smirking Purah, now holding his drink. "Hey, you can't just take that, Miss Purah." She nearly snorted. And he wasn't sure if it was because of what he said or the slight pout on his face. "You're definitely not old enough to drink this one," she teased, twirling the mug in her hand. "And don't call me Miss, makes me feel old." Before Naruto could argue, she tilted the mug back and downed the drink in one go. A few stray drops spilled past her lips, trailing down her neck and onto her collarbone. Naruto felt a slight heat rise to his face. He quickly shook the thought away, cursing Jiraiya's influence on his mind. He settled for a smirk instead. "Didn't take you for a drinker." Purah exhaled in satisfaction, slamming the now empty mug onto the rock Naruto had been sitting on. "Not really, more of a side effect from some experiments I did on myself. Honestly, I can't get drunk unless it's the real strong stuff." Naruto gave a nod, turning his gaze back to the party. The people were still dancing, still celebrating. He smiled softly, even as he enjoyed the moment. The thought remained at the back of his mind, he wouldn't be here forever. As the party continued around him, Naruto let the sounds of laughter and music wash over him, but his mind drifted elsewhere. For the first time since arriving in this world, he felt a sense of belonging, however fleeting it might be. It reminded him of the times he spent in the Leaf Village, celebrating victories with his friends. But the reality was different. This wasn't his home, these weren't his people, and he still had no idea how he was going to get back. His fingers unconsciously tapped against the empty mug beside him as he stared at the flames of a nearby bonfire. "You're thinking about something." Purah's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Naruto blinked and turned to her. She was watching him closely, the playful smirk from earlier now replaced with a knowing look. He debated brushing it off, but something about her gaze made him sigh instead. "Just this place," he admitted, motioning toward the celebration. "It reminds me of home, but at the same time, it just makes me realize how far away I am." Purah was quiet for a moment before she stretched her arms behind her head. "Well, I won't pretend to understand what that feels like," she said. "But I do know that brooding over it all night won't get you anywhere." Naruto chuckled, "Not brooding, just thinking." "Sure you are," she said with a smirk before standing up and brushing off her coat. "Come on, no point in sitting here all night. You've earned a break, so enjoy it while you can." She held a hand out to him. For a moment, Naruto hesitated. He still had so much weighing on his mind, but maybe she was right. He had no answers yet, but worrying wouldn't bring them any faster. With a small grin, he took her hand and let her pull him up. All right, he relented. "But if there's no ramen at the next party, I'm protesting." Purah laughed as they made their way back into the celebration, the weight on Naruto's shoulders feeling just a little lighter. For now, time skip. Naruto woke with a dull ache in his back, a sharp reminder that sleeping on a rock was a terrible idea. He let out a quiet groan, rolling his shoulders in an attempt to ease the stiffness. The air was cool, crisp with the lingering chill of night, and the once roaring fires from the celebration had burned down to faint embers. He glanced around. Most of the people who had been celebrating hours ago were now sprawled across the ground, fast asleep. Their forms barely illuminated by the moonlight. The night was still, save for the occasional crackle of dying flames and the distant sounds of nocturnal creatures stirring. Just as Naruto was about to settle back down, something caught his eye, a faint blue glow, pulsing softly in the darkness just beyond the camp's edge. He furrowed his brows, blinking to make sure he wasn't imagining things. The light flickered, almost as if it were calling to him. A strange pull settled in his chest, an unshakable feeling that he needed to follow it. Without making a sound, Naruto pushed himself up and carefully stepped away from the sleeping crowd. His footsteps were light against the dirt, barely making a noise as he followed the glow into the darkness. The further he walked, the quieter the world around him became. The usual sounds of the night, chirping insects, rustling leaves, faded into an eerie silence. The glow led him deeper into the wilderness, weaving between trees and rocky outcroppings until he reached the entrance of a cave, its mouth yawning open like a beast waiting to swallow him whole. Naruto hesitated. The blue light flickered, floating just beyond the entrance, as if urging him forward. He swallowed, steeling himself before stepping inside. The moment he entered, the air grew thick, damp with the scent of earth and old stone. The walls were lined with strange, glowing runes, their faint luminescence casting soft shadows across the cavern floor. Some of the symbols looked worn, barely visible, while others pulsed in time with the blue light that had guided him here. Naruto ran a hand along the rough stone, feeling the grooves of ancient carvings beneath his fingertips. There was something about this place, something ancient, something important, and as he ventured deeper, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead would change everything. Naruto pressed forward, his steps slow and deliberate as he ventured deeper into the cavern. The blue luminescence grew stronger, casting eerie yet mesmerizing shadows against the jagged rock walls. The air grew heavier, almost charged with something unseen, and with each step, an unshakable tension settled in his chest. Then, he saw it, at the heart of the cave, surrounded by glowing runes etched deep into the stone, sat an ancient-looking device. The structure was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was circular in shape, metallic yet worn with age, its surface covered in intricate engravings that pulsed faintly with the same blue glow as the runes. At its center was a raised pedestal, its edges lined with thin, vein-like channels of shimmering light that led to a hollowed-out core, as if something was once meant to be placed inside. Hovering just above the device was the wisp, the same blue light that had guided him here. It flickered softly, pulsing in rhythm with the energy flowing through the machine, as if waiting for him to approach. Naruto stepped closer, eyes narrowing as he took in the details. Strange glyphs ran along the outer edges, shifting subtly as if alive. The entire structure had the feel of something ancient, something left behind by a people long forgotten. His fingers twitched at his sides. He didn't know why, but a part of him could sense it. This thing, whatever it was, held answers. And he needed to know what they were. Taking a breath, he reached forward. Naruto extended his hand toward the wisp, fingers hesitating just inches away. The soft, pulsing glow of the blue light reflected in his eyes, casting a ghostly shimmer over his skin. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe for it to hover, to react to his presence in some way, but then, in an instant, it shot forward. The wisp rushed toward him with unnatural speed, piercing straight into his chest. A sharp, cold sensation exploded through his body, seizing his lungs and forcing the air from them. His breath hitched, his muscles tensed, and for a brief moment, it felt as though his heart had stopped entirely. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but it was overwhelming, like icy water flooding his veins, sinking into the deepest parts of him. Naruto's vision blurred. His hands instinctively clutched at his chest, but there was nothing to grab. Nothing to stop what was happening. The energy spread outward, threading through his body like a web of frost and light, seeping into his very core. Then, as suddenly as it came, the cold turned weightless. The tension in his chest released, leaving behind an odd emptiness, like something had been taken from him, or maybe something had been left behind. And in that moment, his mind was no longer in the cave. The cave around Naruto faded, swallowed by an endless void of shifting blue light. His feet no longer stood on solid ground, yet he did not fall. A vast expanse stretched before him, the weight of something ancient pressing against his mind. Then, a figure emerged from the swirling abyss. Draped in a long black cloak, the man stepped forward, his movements deliberate, his presence heavy. The hood concealed much of his face, but Naruto could make out strands of blonde hair, the faintest hints of whisker-like marks on his cheeks. The resemblance was uncanny, too close to ignore, yet, something was different. This man stood taller, his expression unreadable, void of the warmth Naruto carried in himself. His very existence felt like a shadow stretching across time itself. "You finally made it here," the figure spoke, his voice calm yet weighted with something deeper, something final. "I was once where you are now, standing in your very shoes, desperate to return to a place I no longer belonged." Naruto's breath hitched, confusion creeping into his mind. His chest still ached from the wisp's touch, but now, it was joined by an unease he couldn't shake. The tether that connected you to your world is gone, the man continued, stepping closer. Severed the moment you arrived. Naruto clenched his fists. What do you mean severed? There has to be a way back. There is no way back, the man interrupted, his voice cutting through the space like a blade. And there never was. Naruto felt his stomach drop. I chased the same hope, the figure admitted, his tone unwavering. I spent years searching, fighting against fate itself. I even traveled through time, believing that if I could manipulate the past or the future, I could undo what had happened. He turned slightly, gesturing towards something behind him. Naruto's eyes followed, and for the first time, he noticed the massive construct before them. It was unlike anything he had seen before, intricate, towering, covered in ancient markings that pulsed with faint energy. It looked like a gateway, a device made with clear purpose, humming with dormant power. I built this, the figure said, poured everything I had into creating a way home. Naruto took a step forward, staring at it with something bordering on hope. But it doesn't work, the man continued, dashing that flicker before it could even take root. It never did. Naruto turned back to him, eyes widening. It only pulls others in, never sends them back. The weight of the word settled in Naruto's chest like a stone. All who come to this world have no way back, the figure stated. Don't waste your life chasing something that cannot, and shall not, exist. Naruto's breath was shallow, his mind struggling to grasp what had just been laid before him. A deep silence stretched between them, and though Naruto couldn't see it, something had shifted in the very fabric of fate itself. A cycle had been broken, the space around him trembled, the blue luminance flickering like a dying flame. The towering construct, the cloaked figure. The endless void, all of it began to unravel, dissolving into streaks of light that faded into nothingness. Naruto barely had time to breathe before the vision shattered entirely. His body was yanked back into reality with an unforgiving force, and the moment the cold air of the cave hit his skin, his knees buckled. He collapsed onto the stone floor, hands digging into the dirt as his breath came out ragged and uneven. The weight in his chest remained heavy, suffocating. No way back. The words echoed in his mind, but they weren't just from the vision. He could hear Purah's voice in his head, steady and factual, when she had first spoken to him about different worlds. She hadn't outright said he was stuck. But the way she explained it, the way she told him that there was no knowledge, no research, nothing on interdimensional travel, her words had carried the same weight. At the time, he had ignored it. He had reassured himself that there was always a way, that someone had to know something. But now, with the vision hammering the truth into his skull, her words felt like the first crack in his resolve, the first sign he had refused to acknowledge. His fingers curled into fists against the ground, nails biting into his palms. He wanted to deny it, to push back against the crushing truth, but the look in that man's eyes, the finality in his voice, had stripped away any illusions he could have clung to. Naruto had lost battles before. He had suffered, bled, fallen deeper into despair than he cared to admit. But this wasn't a battle. There was no enemy to fight, no challenge to overcome. This was the cold, undeniable truth. He was never going home. His breath shuddered as he stared blankly at the cave floor, his body unmoving, trapped in the weight of realization. The flickering blue light of the device cast long shadows across the walls, but Naruto no longer looked at it. For the first time since arriving in this world, he didn't know what to do. That's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Please like and subscribe, and comment ideas if you can. And maybe you could share this with your friends, because you never know, they might like what ifs too. So without further ado, all KAGE, out.